All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Xavier.
Hello. Welcome
Cool.
everyone. Let me
Okay.
just get the game up and running.
Yeah. Real quick. It stopped streaming on Discord.
I'd stop streaming on Discord. Oh, hold
Yeah.
up.
So just go ahead back to Discord real quick and restream it if you can.
Yeah, let me just quickly do that. Oh, yep. Stream
Some
that
quick,
real quick.
some quick technical difficulties here. Sorry, everyone.
All right.
So hello, everyone. Welcome back to my game analysis live stream. I'm joined by Xavier Rodriguez and Joseph Jansen, and today we're playing Cuphead. Now, something interesting about Cuphead is that it is, pretty much the only handcrafted video game ever created. And what I mean by that is all the animations, all the backgrounds, pretty much everything but the actual coloration of the characters was done traditionally and then converted into a video game software so they could create the game. And I'm going to touch on that more a little bit later, but I just kind of wanted to talk about what this game is and kind of why I chose it for this week. And I think the main reason that I chose this game is because it's absolutely beautiful, and it kind of attests to the fact that video games are an art form, and it's a classic run and gun it's heavily focused on boss battles and incredibly challenging gameplay, and all of the visuals, of course, were painstakingly created traditionally, and I think that's something that deserves a little bit of attention. And I think other than that, we could probably jump into our first boss fight, unless Xavier or Joe, you have anything to say more about that.
Do we want to do a boss fight or do we want to do a run and gun section first?
Tell you what, why don't we cover a run and gun section first, so we can kind of talk about the game, so we can give Joe a chance to talk about the Contra inspired gameplay,
Okay.
Contra, Batman,
Yeah.
games like that.
Before we go into that, Quinn, do you want to talk a bit about like this specific art style that this game is harkening back to?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, something interesting about Cuphead is that, it was created by two brothers originally. So the team that started the game were two brothers with zero experience. I'm pretty sure the lead designer actually was working in construction before they created the game, and they had this dream of creating a video game together. So they decided to create Cuphead, which is a game that focuses on 1930s cartoons, stuff created by Max Fleischer and Up-I-Works, old Disney films, and Betty Boop cartoons. And I think that they really constrained themselves to this art form, this art style, which is almost 80 years old at this point, in order to create this amazing game. And I think that is glorious, because they were able to execute this art style with pretty much no formal training and make a game that's truly memorable and truly unique. So, that's just something I learned while I was doing research for this game that I thought was really interesting. And a lot of the animation they studied, these cartoons, these old cartoons directly, and tried to make everything feel authentic. And I think that was perfect. And one thing, interesting thing about Studio MDHR is that they're pretty much a family company, as I like to say. And I'm not saying that in like the literal sense. They legitimately have like their cousins and I think some aunts and uncles working with them on Cuphead, that worked with them on Cuphead to create the game. And I think that's really cool because they all knew each other, so they were able to put out this really ambitious title with this super strict art style, and it's kind of perfect. The only complaint I have about the game is with the gameplay, it's extremely challenging, and I think they did that on purpose, obviously. But the art style, it attracts a very wide audience because it's so unique and it's so interesting. So we have this we have this issue where it's actually kind of like an issue and an upside, where we have people coming and playing this game who have never played anything like it, and then they get mad confused. So Xavier, why don't you just jump into the run and gun gameplay? Because I don't want to have us like circling around
the around the
menu
level for
map.
the
Yeah,
entire stream.
yeah. Pop into the
Yeah.
first level. I can keep talking about this while we're going, and
Yeah.
then Joe, I'd love it if you popped in when we get into the gameplay. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
the one thing I will say before we get into the gameplay is just that it's interesting that you mentioned how the art style is a callback to 30s, animation. Because I would say that one thing interesting I found about the gameplay is that the gameplay also is a throwback to kind of a different era of gaming in itself. Specifically, kind of like the NES era of run and gun games that were
Yeah.
infamously very difficult.
Yes, but then again, back then, right? I mean, when the original Mario came out, you got 3 lives to beat the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of the older people in the audience, you probably are remembering exactly what I'm talking about. I was too young to deal with this pain. We've always had, game overs, and then we were able to restart at a different save with 5 lives. And once you guys lost all your lives, you had to put new quarters into the machine to keep playing. So, Cuphead kind of draws its roots from those challenging games. And Joe, if you wanted to jump in on that, I know you did a lot more research on the kind of gameplay. So go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
giving
I
you the
mean,
reins.
personally, I haven't played Cuphead before, but from what I'm looking at, it definitely reminds me of games like Contra, Ghosts and Goblins, or Battletoads, like all these classic NES titles where it's a huge difficulty curve and you're doing a lot of platforming, running and gunning. So it's nice to kind of harken back to this old retro style of games, and it's something that I personally haven't played in a long while, and just looking at it now, it makes me kind of excited that there's almost like a little bit of a comeback in this kind of era of game design. And like obviously they've modernized this a tad bit by allowing, extra hit points for your character, or, checkpoints where you're able to restart the level and not have to go completely from the very beginning of the
Yeah,
game. before.
restart the entire game and spend more quarters on it.
Yeah, I know in the
um,
past when I had an NES, I owned Contra, so like that was always something that irritated me, was when I got super far in and I screwed up, and then I was like, well, guess I'm not gonna touch this game for a while.
Yeah, same with Battletoads. One interesting thing about this game that's different, is it different from Battletoads, because since we're talking about it, is that Battletoads was often so difficult that you had to rely completely on memory to get through it. Whereas this game is a little bit more dynamic, in which some of the bosses, some of the map enemies, will spawn differently. So you can't memorize it if you die. You just have to continuously learn the patterns and animation frames of the bosses, and it might just introduce a new one that you haven't seen in a previous playthrough. So I think that keeps the gameplay varied and challenging. And though this is not my type of game, I can really appreciate what Studio MDHR was going for. And I understand why someone like Xavier would really like this game. I'd also like to mention that Xavier is actually the one playing right now. I realized that I could not talk about this game and play it at the same time, because it requires an unbelievable amount of focus to play. And the fact that Xavier is able to even remotely converse with us and play this game is kind of baffling to me. I don't know how you're doing it, man, but kudos to you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually haven't really, I haven't really said anything yet. I've just kind of been letting you guys talk because you've had so much to say about the game.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, like, stuff that I noticed too is like, when we look at 1930s animations, especially when we started to see color in the animations, they had to color those in frame by frame. And something interesting about this game is that the backgrounds are, of course, watercolor, just like 1930s cartoons were, and with hand drawn and then hand inked characters. So the studio MDHR, they hand drew every single animation, and I think the one of the brothers, one of the brothers was the lead animator, and the other brother was the lead developer, like the lead engineer, right? And so the lead animator's wife was responsible for all of the inking that went into this game. So, obviously, one of the brothers would do the animation, and then the wife would ink it. And then they had their cousin, who was a digital painter, ink all the characters in. And the reason, or sorry, color all the characters in. And the reason that they did that digitally is because after testing hand painting the characters versus digitally painting the characters, they couldn't find a discernible difference between a hand painted character in this game and a digitally painted character. And so they decided to shave around 5 years off of development by digitally painting them in. And I think a lot of the choices they made were in the interest of art, and that's one of the interesting decisions they made. That was in more in terms of like development scheduling and how much time they had to put the game out. Now, one other thing about this game is that the main theme of the story is you play as Cuphead and his brother Mugman, if you're playing with two people, who, lost a bunch of money at a casino, and they ended up losing their souls to the devil. So they have to go and track down all of the debtors in order to get their souls back from the devil and the guy who owns the casino, this big dice head dude. And why this is interesting is because it is due to the fact that the brothers had to quit both of their jobs, because before they were working full time and then coming home and working on this game. They ended up quitting both of their jobs and then remortgaging their houses.
Quinn, is it
in
okay
order
if I
to
interrupt you for a
work
second?
on this game. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna, I just beat the run and gun section, so I'm going to move on to the first boss fight of this.
Well, this
stream.
isn't technically the first boss fight, but this is
Oh,
the
of
one
this
we had
stream,
you
yeah, of
practice
this stream.
beforehand. Yeah.
Um,
So this is the two frog brothers, and so I've never beaten this personally. I actually stopped playing at this boss fight because this first attack from the green frog brother is so unbelievably irritating, and I understand kind of like what they were going for. He's throwing these fists in a flurry. And Xavier, you made a distinction in these two characters. What did you compare them to again?
I compared them to the characters Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, because I've seen people mention how they are kind of like a reference to these characters. You'll see that the frog, the attack it shot out just now, was very similar to Ryu's Hadouken. That's a very famous move from fighting games.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
So, one thing about this game that makes it so addicting for some people, not necessarily me, is that these fights have usually 3 phases. So Xavier cleared that first phase where he was fighting the bugs and the Fists of Fury, and now he was playing the fan versus the disc thrower, and now he's got to fight the slot machine. And I really love the game design in this because you don't actually see a health bar on these bosses. The only thing that like the only real thing you can compare it to is the actual animations of the boss and what forms they take in the phases of the fight. So Xavier knows, since this is the 3rd phase, it's likely the end of the fight, and when he dies, he's able to see how far he made it in the boss fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a nice touch, but it's also an irritating touch because Xavier has no idea when a phase will change. He has no idea when the fight will end. He only knows that there's probably 3 phases, and he just needs to get through those 3 phases. And each phase is different.
What's
So,
the average length of like a boss fight?
It's
Like,
actually
what is it? How long?
It's really
I'd
short.
say,
It's only like
it's-
3 minutes, maybe. If
yeah,
you're
if you
like
do
you've
it,
got
if
it
you
down.
do it right, it's 3 phases. One thing to make this easier, I did purchase an upgrade at the store, which is this the red carrot shotgun gun. Normally you have this blue gun that just shoots straight, but there's this shotgun that does more damage, and those are those red carrots coming out, right? So you can switch between the two depending on the situation. I bought that immediately after clearing the first run and gun level with the coins I had, so I could make fighting the bosses easier. And even with those upgrades, which is kind of like in some cases considered cheating by a lot of players, it's still unbelievably difficult. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Joe, do you have anything you want to say specifically, or Xavier, anything to add about the specific phases of this boss that you find either interesting or, I guess, maybe irritating?
So something interesting to notice about the boss fights of this game in general is just kind of the way the boss behavior, general boss behavior throughout the fight. Because you notice that throughout all the phases, the boss only actually has like 1 or 2 attacks per phase. In the first phase, you saw that they shot out the energy beams, and then also there was an attack where they, the older brother shot out like these ladybugs. And then in the second phase, obviously, it's the fan attack. One brother it turns into a fan. The other one shoots out these balls that you have to dodge. And now finally we have the coin slot, which has 3 attacks of its own. But it's kind of interesting just to see, like, there's not technically a lot going on with each phase of the fight. Oh, and see, already
Nice job,
beat him.
man.
As I was explaining it,
pretty
I beat him.
That was impressive. I'm amazed you were able to keep that going while you were doing that. I was kind of
and
amazed.
there's like some
Okay.
challenges too. With
Yeah,
the-
so
Yeah.
here's where we see the challenges, and this rewards player I think there's a phrase for this that I'm lacking here. Forgive me. What is it? Well, it obviously encourages replayability, right?
Yeah.
But it rewards player skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the better you do in a fight, the higher grade you get. And I think you get rewards from that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it takes a lot of
So
reference from like some of the Metal
yeah,
Gear games or Resident Evil, where like, depending on how fast and how well you complete a run, it gives you a score from like A B A B A B C and like as well as like S, like if you got the best rank.
Yes.
so this fight, Xavier has not practiced.
Okay, yeah,
Hit it with
so
regular, man.
yeah, okay, guilty. I have to be. I feel guilty
So,
because I technically
one more
did practice that other boss. That's why I was so good against
Yeah.
it. But from this point
Obviously.
on, I'm gonna be acting exactly how everyone else that plays this game plays it, which is to say, getting hit a lot, dying a lot. So get prepared for that.
Crap. Well, before Xavier started it, you noticed that it said simple and regular next to it. So, the way you advance is you have to beat the boss on regular, but you can practice with simple, and then the attacks will be a little bit easier to kind of maneuver and understand. So the animation frames of the boss will be a little bit slower, giving you more time to react to their attacks slash parries slash movements, right? And so Xavier's playing it on advance. He has a lot less time to analyze this boss, figure it out, and then find a way to beat it, right? So, obviously, I think the way you're supposed to play this game is you play it once on simple, and then, you go back and you play it on regular. You beat it, right? I think that's really good, giving players an opportunity to kind of actually win after hours and hours and hours of losing. And then some boss fights in this game do take hours to complete. This game requires an immense amount of time and patience to play. And that's patience I don't necessarily have, but I really wanted to analyze it on the show because it's so beautiful. But if you really look at, like, I just want to transition from gameplay to art because I feel like we've been talking a lot about gameplay, and I want to talk a little bit more about the animation. So here we're seeing a lot of classic animation tropes such as the squash and stretch and smear frames, which we can't see because they're literal frames. But a way that they get this really great fluid dynamic movement is, of course, they're drawing this out frame by frame by frame, and in some cases they include these things called smear frames in order to transition between one phase and another, and that's how they blend them together seamlessly. And that's a trick that's been around since the 1930s when they started, or like I don't actually know when they started making cartoons. I didn't actually do a lot of research on that, but that's something that's been around since the 1930s and before. These smear frames and these animations. So when he like kind of goes back into that wind up for that boxing glove punch, right before he goes into the boxing punch and throws himself forward, that's where a smear frame would be, to kind of fill the gaps in between those two incredibly different shapes of the character. Now, one thing that I really would like to do in the future is take a look at the art book for this game, the art Bible when you're researching games. I feel like having a little bit more insight into exactly how they created certain bosses would be excellent, especially when it comes to these earlier bosses, because these are the easiest ones, obviously. It's the beginning of the game. I'd like to know how they design the more complex, the more difficult bosses. Also, Xavier, congratulations on making it to the second phase.
Thank you very much.
Joe, why don't you jump in on this one? Tell me kind of what you're seeing, what you're thinking of this.
Well, what I noticed is you can switch out your different like projectile items. So Xavier, you were able to switch between your shotgun carrots as well as like the regular blue light projectile, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pressing the left bumper will switch between different weapons that the player can use in
Is there any other items you have available to you? Like I know you saw you can use a parry as well as like your super meter power. Like what else is there available for the Cuphead?
Joe, we can actually cover that after the boss fight. But there are like modifier abilities that you can add to Cuphead or Mugman depending on which character you're playing as. They're the same upgrades, of course, but that's just something great. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, there are upgrades, and we can see them on a really awesome card inside of the main menu map. And what's cool about the card for the character upgrades is it's reminiscent of speakeasy drink cards. So something interesting about the 1920s, not necessarily the 30s, but obviously the 1920s bled into the 30s in a way. It was only a decade later. we saw the emergence of speakeasies, and the way they'd sell drinks is by having these like amazing menu cards with the drinks on them. And a lot of times, you know, at these speakeasies, they would sell something else, and then it would come with a complimentary drink. Therefore, they're not selling alcohol technically, right? So on these cards, you would see essentially the drink or some other kind of classy looking text or artwork. And so that card appears inside that main menu map. And I think that's really cool. You know, obviously this game, despite despite being something that came out in 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Despite coming out in 2017, it's
Oh
really a piece of
no.
history in its own regard.
How close was that?
Because
Oh.
we're seeing, wow, that's really
Oh.
sad. Man.
This is the average
Um,
Cuphead experience for many.
Yeah, so like it's like by paying homage to all of these classic, you know, animations, cartoons, and pieces of history, we have a piece of history in itself. And I think that I know that the brothers that created this game. Hold on, let me just look up their last names. I can't pronounce it correctly, so I need to look up a pronunciation so I can give I can give credit where credit's due here. Joe, go ahead and take over while I look that up.
What I think what's interesting was with a lot of the public reception with this game. He said it was all generally favorable and positive reviews, especially with like the art style being the unique selling point here, obviously. But I think the main critique that was noted just with this, and like this is just a general thing, and it's not even like a major critique, was just like the left to right run and gun gameplay just was lacking inventiveness. But like that, like just that's what I heard a lot from reading about this game. But like I appreciate how the brothers were able to kind of like add some RPG elements, like whether it's like unique items to your character or upgrading them, so in that way it kind of differentiates itself from other traditional retro video games.
Well, I think it's kind of funny when you say retro, because would you classify this as a retro game?
I'm not exactly sure. Like because it harkens back to a lot of gameplay design philosophy from that time, but it still takes modern elements from today's game design philosophy and kind of mixes them together. It's got the challenge as like as of traditional retro games, but it still provides some features of its own that makes it something new. So it's kind of hard. It's almost like in this gray area for me to decide like whether or not it is classified as retro or not.
I guess it's up to personal opinion. I would say yes, it has pieces of retro gameplay, but it is not a retro game in and of itself. Also, just to clarify on that, the brothers are the Moldenhauer brothers, which is really funny. I watched multiple like kind of documentaries and video essays on this game and heard the names multiple times. But the game was originally created by Chad and Jared Moldenhauer in the Unity game engine, which honestly is very fitting. I could not see a game like this being made in Unreal. I feel like that would be a complete waste of time. And also, you'd be fighting the engine the entire time to look old when it's supposed to have like really great ray tracing and lighting effects. Hold on. Do we have any questions in the chat?
I'm not seeing any currently.
I guess some other things I'd like to bring up, about the game. So in general, like with like I said, let's talk about like kind of the music, I guess. So one great thing about this soundtrack is it was composed by a guy that lived down the street from the Moldenhauer brothers and had been playing video games with them their entire life. And they knew that they chose him because he knew how music for games worked. And the game soundtrack was recorded live by an orchestra, like a jazz band, to get these amazing beats. And originally it was supposed to only be 4 tracks, but as they started going to E3 and showing the game to more people, they began to get more positive reception, more hype. So they had to scope the game up, add more bosses, add more levels, and with that the soundtrack expanded as well. So what started out as 4 tracks ended up being probably 130.
Oh wow.
which is incredible. Now, here's why this game is truly special. It's the fact that, these brothers with no experience in the games industry were able to create one of the most unique titles of the 2010s. Like, just think about that. Put that in perspective. Imagine that Joe and I were to just create the most amazing game in the world, right? Or one of the most amazing, at least the most amazing games of the year, right? I mean, that just sounds insane. And to them, one thing that they said when creating this game was, if I had any idea where this would go and what it was going to take, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Wow.
Which, yeah, he said, like, if I had known, like, all the stuff that would actually go into it, I probably would have just kept pouring concrete and see where that went. Is pretty much, it's a rough paraphrase quote there. Now, obviously he's joking, but when you think about it, anyone can make video games, and all it takes is the ability to take, like, it takes courage to take a chance on something that's terrifying. And what is happening?
Okay, so this is a tutorial for the airplane section.
Oh, that's
yeah.
cool.
So
That's great.
the running guns, obviously, an allusion to running guns of the 80s. Contra, what you were describing earlier. These are a reference to shooters of the 80s, such as like Gradius, Life Force.
I would
all
say
that.
I'd say 90s, because near the end of the 80s there was actually a decline in video games. Like most of the run and gun games and the shooter games came out in the 90s. Like I think Castlevania. I'm gonna look this up right now so I don't get this wrong.
Quinn, would you mind? Could you do me a favor? Could you look up Life Force for me? It's a I wouldn't say it's a famous, but it is a popular side-scrolling shooter. I remember from the NES days. And the reason kind of I made the comparison was just because this layout of it's a side-scroller, shoot.
Oh, you know what,
attack enemies.
Xavier? I was wrong. Castlevania came out in '86.
Yeah,
So-
late 80s to 90s.
Yeah. What did you want me to take a look at?
Life
Go
Force.
ahead and jump into the exit, man.
Yeah, I'm just taking a second to understand the control sets, and then Y shrinks. Oh, whoa.
Yeah. All right, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, let's do this.
What did you need me to look up again?
Life Force. Okay. And while we're here, actually, let me go back quickly to the boss we just fought, the ooze monster, because I just realized that the character design of this monster is very similar to a creature from the Dragon Quest franchise called Slime. Now, for those who aren't familiar with, Dragon Quest is a super influential 80s RPG that kind of that kick-started the genre of JRPGs as people know
Interactive
it.
cinematic.
What?
Oh, similar to no, you're thinking of Dragon's Lair, Joe.
Oh.
Yeah, Dragon's
Close,
Quest.
but no cigar, man.
Dragon's
Sorry.
Quest, called Dragon Warrior in America for the first 4 titles, is a Japanese role-playing game. And the combat was styled where basically you would take turns, you would hit an enemy would hit you. That was how combat would progress. And one of the earliest enemies you could fight in the game was this monster called the Slime. They were this very small, cute, blue, just kind of glob of ooze, basically.
Wow, that's a very interesting and specific reference. Pop
Yeah.
back out to the plane level. I feel
Mhm.
like the audience has seen enough of the slime monster.
Yeah, I was just showing them so they kind of have an idea. If they don't know what a slime is, just imagine that, but without the nose.
I mean, just play Minecraft. You know what a slime is.
Yeah. But it's just funny to see another 80s reference. It seems to be a lot of those in this.
I've seen a lot of clips from this boss fight. I have doubts that you're gonna beat this on the stream, but
Oh,
jeez.
another great piece of animation to take a look at here is obviously the blimp on a unicycle that also turns into a deadly moon, and the fact that she is turning into multiple different phases in the middle of the boss fight with their own animations is awesome, right? Because you're gonna die a lot.
Wow.
So this is a boss fight with a lot more phases. So obviously the game is ramping up in difficulty, and it's giving you game.
I like how when she says "ha," it comes out as a projectile.
Yeah. So actually, this is kind of a reference to. This is kind of I guess a reference or sort of a piece of like an idea, right, that they had during development where they wanted to make a map, and the song that you're hearing on the screen was the actual enemy. So the bullets were coming at you in the form of the music notes, and it was taking place on a oh Xavier.
Well, that's
Poor
you win.
soul.
You win some, you lose some.
Oh, he parried it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so what's kind of cool about the plane is that you can parry a little bit easier. You don't have to jump up in the air, land on top, and then parry.
Yeah, you can just parry and it just like a little sweep attack.
No, Joe, I just want to get your input on this because this is something that you love to talk about. If you were to play this game, what do you think you would love and what do you think you would hate?
Uh, from looking at it right now, I one thing I obviously enjoy is just I do enjoy challenge in games. Like I don't play typical games like Dark Souls as much as as Xavier does or Bloodborne, but like I do love challenging games. Where like it provides a lot of different difficulties that and end results that show off like all the accomplishments you've done for a specific level or a boss sequence, and that entices me to replay it in the future just because it adds to like, do I want to get a better score or show this off to my friends? As far as things to dislike about the game, I wouldn't say I dislike it, but I can't really think of anything specific. Like, it harkens back to the idea of just a retro video game, but like how I feel like I'd only play this game in like short bursts, and that might be the only negative. Like, I don't see myself playing this game long term.
Not like you'd play Fallout or Skyrim.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, that's probably not the intention with this game. It's a local co-op game, but also provides solo play. So I think it's something that's just like a unique indie game to have for someone's collection. That way they can play this from time to time, but I don't know how effective it would be long term.
Well, I think this game is definitely yeah, but besides its its outstanding popularity upon release, selling I think 1 million digital copies within the first week of its release. It's extremely successful, right? But it's not for everyone, and it's kind of the first game we've covered on the stream that is definitely made for a niche market, but because of its art style, it attracted so many people to playing it. And a lot of people actually, upon playing this game, choosing it for the art, choosing it for the look of it, ended up loving it. They ended up loving this type of game, and that lended itself to opening up this genre of game to a bunch of different people. And I think that that's kind of amazing. And it's not often that a game does that. With especially with the most recent releases of certain video games, especially in the late 2010s, we saw games just kind of coming out every year, and it was a lot of the same thing. So in 2017, I would argue that we were desperate for titles like this one. It was something
Hmm.
different. It was something new. And I wish that at that time in my life I was more into playing games, with specifically playing games not just because they were like a fun game where I would do the same thing over and over again, because I played a lot of Fallout when I was in high school, so a lot of times I would just do quests in Fallout, and that was pretty much my type of game. I would either play Fallout or I would play Halo. That was it. So, I
Yo,
wish that I wish that I had taken the time to really experience a lot of titles similar to this or different titles in order to kind of understand what I liked. Because I like this game. I don't necessarily love playing it because it's so unbelievably difficult and can be very frustrating. But
there
I
is an
can I
appreciation for it.
I appreciate it. I love what they were set out to do, and that they were able to accomplish it with such a small team, and that they made it with no experience. Like it truly is an inspiring story which is what makes the game so intriguing. It's what makes Cuphead awesome, really.
Mhm.
So, you know, thinking about that, and then going forward, we have this inspirational story of two brothers making a game. We have a game that appeals to a lot of different people on the grounds of art, and it also shuts off a lot of people to this style of game due to its outstanding difficulty. We have a game that's paying homage to games that came out almost 30 years before it, and we have a title that's just truly unique for the time period it came out in, for the 2010s. Like, people are going to be studying this game for years to come. And I'm sure that a lot of game design students in school, like ourselves, not necessarily in VR, will be studying this game and taking a look at certain aspects of it that were successful and unsuccessful. And that's always a good sign, because we can't analyze Halo forever. There's gotta be new
As
stuff.
much as we'd love to.
Sorry, that was a terrible example. We cannot analyze the Mario games forever.
Yeah.
Despite, like, they are innovating with every release, but this is different. It takes pieces, but it has its own pieces too. And it also has expanded from the original run and gun gameplay of the 90s, incorporating certain elements from the last 20 years, like you said, Joe. And I think that it's special for that reason. Now, I get to jump into kind of my favorite thing about this game, and that is the randomness. Now, Joe, when it comes to randomness in video games, what comes to mind, and what do you appreciate?
Ah.
Randomness. 'Cause the first thing that comes to mind for me is the variations in gameplay. I mean, we've been watching this fight for probably about 10 minutes now, and we're still seeing new pieces to it, which is incredibly interesting, right? And after you fight this blimp lady, do you really think you were going to be fighting a ram in the sky, or two twin clouds that were spinning around and throwing stuff at you? I mean, I know Xavier probably wasn't expecting that, right?
Nope, definitely not expecting
So,
that.
the random aspects of this gameplay are what make it so special. And I think that the reason that this game is so replayable, that this game it can be so addicting, is not the fact that it's incredibly challenging and that you feel this great release after you beat it. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, but I think it's also due to the fact that whenever you play this game, if you haven't played it yet, or if you are planning on playing it, one thing you can appreciate is that you're gonna load it up every time. Every time you load it up while you're trying to beat it, the original story, you're going to see something brand new. You're gonna see something that you didn't expect. You're gonna fight a boss with a move that, when you see it, you're gonna have no idea how to beat it in the first place, and then later come across it and realize, like, wow, okay, so that's how that works. That was the point of their design. And I don't think a lot of games that I play or have played encourage that kind of thought. And if there's any other examples of that, that kind of randomness in gameplay, I would say Mario Kart is an easy example. You do a race in Mario Kart, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, something similar with Mario and Cuphead is, you think you have the upper hand, and then a blue shell comes out of nowhere and it bombs you out of the sky. And in Cuphead, another phase of the boss happens. It's just every time you play it, that happens. You know, and I think that adds to the overall experience in a way that makes the game incredibly interesting and intriguing. And it's something that everyone should at least try. And not everyone will like, but it's something that everyone should try. Because I don't necessarily like playing it right, like I said before, but I do love the game. I appreciate the art. I appreciate the gameplay. Um, featured inside. Now, Joe, when it comes down to, like, now that I've explained what I meant by randomness in gameplay, what else can you draw from in that as a game designer?
Well, it creates interest in then the replay value, because you won't expect the same thing over and over every time you log back into the game. So that helps people want to kind of like see the different outcomes or different, I guess, reactions that will occur. So like not a Xavier is like with this boss fight, they have the same stages, the moon, the clouds, and then the blimp mode, but like they kind of come in at different paces, so it's not the same timing, the same repetition over and over, which is nice. So it always keeps you on your feet. You're saying like when are they going to transform? When do I have to adapt my gameplay and my fighting so then that way I can counter their attacks or dodge them. So that's it. It keeps the challenge always active and you're not stagnating. And that's what I'm seeing in the gameplay here in terms of just randomness. And like you said, Mario Kart is another good example because you don't expect like when an item will hit you or if it'll be a more powerful item like a blue shell. Um, as far as other examples, I can't specifically think one at the moment. I'm just like drawing a bunch of blanks. I don't know why. But like those are the few that I just noticed from when you were discussing earlier. One question I wanted to ask and kind of get more in depth on about from your research portion, Quinn, was like a couple of the different earlier concepts they were thinking of for the game. Because I know you said they were thinking of previously designing the game about through like an elementary school, and you'd be going through like the different levels of art through K through 12. Like like kindergarten was like the turkey hands, and then they would be fighting through like different paintings and stuff. Could you talk about that maybe a bit more?
Yeah, of course. So when I was watching the interview about kind of like the overall development history of Cuphead, one thing they talked about is like obviously the only goal they wanted to achieve was to make a game together, the two brothers originally, right? And one of their original concepts, their ideas, was creating a game where it's obviously the same kind of style as Cuphead, but instead of this 1930s aesthetic, and they originally wanted to create Cuphead with the 1930s cartoon aesthetic, but uh, thought it might be too difficult. Obviously they hadn't been working with 1930s animation their whole lives, right? They didn't know exactly kind of how to do it, and they knew it was going to be maybe too challenging. It might have been too high in scope. So they thought, well, what if we made a game where we went through an elementary school and we fought
Yeah, cool.
kids drawing. So one of the ideas, of course, that you mentioned, Joe, is the hand turkey, and they would have like simple animations for different bosses of these like childhood art coming to life and attacking you, or you're fighting them. I'm glad they didn't make that game though, because I personally would not have been as interested in that as I would have been in the Cuphead. What is known as Cuphead. I would have been less interested in that game if they had made that idea. Though it's still a really unique and interesting idea. It's just not necessarily interesting to me, and I'm glad that they made this game instead.
Yeah.
Now, jumping off of that, how would you make this a VR title?
Oh goody.
Yeah.
Uh,
This game hinges so heavily.
Short answer is he would not.
yeah.
But let's just entertain the idea, because I feel a lot of VR developers think about how to make games and what games they're going to make. The way I would do this is, instead of making it like a full VR game, I would make this awesome looking 1930s theater, and I would make you play the game on a ginormous screen, similar to
Mhm.
Trover Saves the Universe or Lucky's Tale. Or I would specifically hone in on the on the boss fights where you are in the plane, and I would make it a first person fight. I'd make it a multiplayer first person flight sim, right? Where you play as these crazy, kooky characters like the Cuphead characters and fight these awesomely dynamically animated bosses, but but it's in first person, and you're in like kind of like a tunnel, and you're just working together to beat these bosses that are absolutely insane. Now, issues that come with that is depth perception in VR. So we would probably have an issue detecting projectiles like bullets. So we'd have to differentiate the projectiles that we're looking at in order to make them easier to look at in VR. Obviously, we could not take any assets from Cuphead in making the game. We would have to completely redo everything in 3D, stereoscopic. So honestly, it wouldn't even be Cuphead anymore if we went with that route. But it's still interesting. Why aren't there any VR games where it's essentially a boss rush similar to this game? with dynamic shifting boss fights that keep players interested and challenge them to the point where they want to keep playing to beat the boss, but it's also like equally challenging to players where they feel a huge achievement when they do finally beat that boss. Something that's punishing but is not unplayable. Joe, how would you design? Let's take the game design of Cuphead here. The 1990s game design, right? We're fighting, we're running and gunning, we're fighting these amazing bosses, which is what the run and gun games of the 90s were known for, and Cuphead is known for, is these like super awesome boss fights, these epic, challenging games. How would you make a game like that? How would you want to design it?
I guess like what you were saying earlier, I wouldn't want to do this if we were doing it where it was these run and gun levels and then the boss battles come after, or like you have a run and gun level that leads up to a boss fight similar to how Mario does it. I would want to do it in like a third person perspective where you as like the VR in with the VR camera, you're like this all seeing like in almost an orthogonal view, and you can kind of control your character from a distance up above in the sky. So then that way you can kind of still have this, essence of like platforming that you're doing right now in the 2D variation right here, but you could still provide a unique sense of visuals. Obviously those have to all be recreated in 3D, but I think you could still do a lot of unique variations for the boss battles using a lot of blend shape systems to figure out like which mode or combat mode they're gonna be in, and then like communicate that to the player, saying like, okay, now I can't fight him in this stage, or I have to be jumping around more often in this variation. So you could still achieve that. I think it just had to be through different methods, and it'd be interesting to kind of see them replicate this through VR. I don't really see it working successfully if it was like a first person where like you as the player are in the shoes of Cuphead,
No.
because the platforming just it wouldn't be possible. You
It
just
looked like a really bad version of VR chat.
yeah,
Is the best I could assume. I don't think I've ever played a platformer in VR. Or the only platformer I have played in VR is Boneworks, and the platforming sections of that game are my least favorite part. So,
exactly.
like again, at the beginning when I pitched that question, I said I wouldn't. I would not make this game in VR, but I wanted to take a look at it anyway due to how much of an inspiring story it is, because I know that a lot of people that follow me on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, uh, they look at game like a lot of students too. They look at game design as this like incredibly challenging thing. Like, oh my god, I'd never be able to do what you do, and I don't want to be like what's the word, conceited, but I've had that said to me before, right? And I think that Cuphead is the perfect example of anyone can make games, and anyone can make awesome games. All it takes is the ability to study and analyze other successful games, other successful experiences, and have a really solid idea going into it, and then work is the best way to is the best way to inspire others, is to like this game inspires me personally because I've wanted to make games my whole life, and I always looked at it as like, oh well, I'd have to do programming and all of this stuff, and I didn't actually realize that art was also involved in that too. God, if I would have known I had to do art and programming, I never would have become a VR developer, but now I'm here. So
Wait, where does that sound familiar?
Too late to go back.
too late to go back. I enjoy what I do, but obviously, I think at 18 years old, when I decided I was going to become a VR developer, become a game designer, right? If I would have known all of the hardships that I would be facing at that stage in my life, at that level of thinking that I was capable of, I would have been like, no, no way am I doing that. Not gonna happen. I'm going into accounting or something similar. Like something that I could like I mean like God, I'm stuttering here, Joe. Take over this conversation. I'm so sorry. I need to like kind of compose myself a little bit here.
I think it's just interesting because like you look at the two brothers that made this game, and they had no background, and like you said, anyone can make a video game. It just takes hard work, understanding, and taking reference from other games, and just putting the time and effort in. At the end of the day, what I can take away from this is that it just takes time and commitment to a consistent vision, and they were able to do that. Like, they had deviations in their thought process and design philosophy. They said that in their documentaries, but like at the end of the day, they still kept committed to the idea, like, we're gonna make a 30s golden age cartoon aesthetic. We're gonna make it a tough but fair platforming that harkens back to old retro video games. And at the end of the day, like, if you look at it at face value, they did that. But what made them more successful is that they were able to recreate this visual of art that
this work of art. They were
Yeah.
able to like absolutely true to form replicate an 80-year-old art style.
yeah. And that's the unique selling point of this experience. Like, when you look at this game, you're like, I really like this art style. It reminds me of that. I want to play it now and see what it's like.
Yeah, especially because I don't know if you guys are familiar with the channel Boomerang, which specializes in kind of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons of the 60s and 70s, right? But there wasn't really anything like there wasn't really an opportunity to watch any cartoons by Max Fleischer and of iWorks unless you either like kind of went to Disney World and went to their historical sections where they talked about how Disney started and how these other companies influenced Disney. And I think a big part of what we see from Disney today, it originates from what we're seeing right before us. And getting to go back and take a look at like how someone in the modern day would create a game as if they were creating it in the 1930s, which is unheard of. I don't think anyone else was like, yeah, I'm gonna make a game exactly like I thought they would have made it in the 1930s with the tech they had back then. But they did it. They did it. And I feel like if I were to pitch this, if Cuphead didn't exist and I were to try and pitch it to someone, they'd be like, "You're crazy, kid. No way." Which is why it had to be made by an indie studio. And I originally thought that Cuphead was made by this large company, and I didn't realize, who it was actually made by until I started doing research for this live stream. And I'm so glad that I was able to do that because what I learned during my research phase for the live stream was, it's actually the inspiration that I needed to kind of deal with VR right now. Because, in the major currently, we have a lot of work we're doing, and I think I would say, 90% of my time is spent on my coursework, and trying to be a better artist, a better programmer, a better VR developer, better developer, So, and sometimes with that comes failure, and failure after failure after failure can be a little bit demotivating. So doing the research for this live stream and learning about what the team that made Cuphead went through in the creation of this piece of art, it made me feel, oh my God, is that a boss at the end of a run and gun? That's not fair. What they went through creating this piece of art, it feels really good to see someone else who kind of has felt the way that I feel occasionally as a developer, and it's inspiring to say the least. I don't know, Joe. What does it do for you? Like, how does knowing the history of Cuphead and its development, and seeing what the Moldenhauer brothers created, how does that make you feel?
I'm just when we were listening to their history, I was so surprised that they were like not only sacrificing extra time outside of their work life to make this game, but just remortgaging their house and starting from rock bottom, like, and still committed to the idea. Like, that's true commitment right there. And I was just like, damn, that's amazing.
Xavier, we don't have any comments, do we?
Let's see. Looking at, no, not currently.
Yeah, I don't see any either on Twitch.
Well, we can probably do our outro and talk about next week's episode.
All right, sure thing.
All right, so, Joe, I would actually just like to start out by thanking everyone who did watch this episode of the Game Design Livestream. We're going to be doing, I think this is the 5th episode. We'll be doing 5 more episodes after this one, and that'll be the first season, and then we're going to kind of decide whether or not we want to go forward and do another season of 10 episodes. And Obviously, we're gonna probably rebrand it from my name to our actual indie game studio, Wicked Dreams, which consists of myself, Joseph Jansen, Xavier, and Justin Nam, and we're currently working on a VR game together. So we're probably gonna rebrand it to that studio name, and it'll still be on the channel in the same place that it was before, but just under a different name besides QK Halliday, which is just my gamer tag. It's my moniker that I use online, right? Not the most recognizable title, obviously. But besides that, Joe, would you like to talk about next week's stream, the guests that we're having on, and what we plan on covering?
Yeah, so next week, excitingly enough, we'll be covering and analyzing Halo 3, created by Bungie Studios back in 2007. And we'll be having a guest appearance with Carlos Perfume, who works at 343 Industries as a surface and texture artist. So it'll be exciting to have him on board because he used to be a great colleague of ours that we were not necessarily worked alongside with, but got a lot of feedback.
He was a mentor to us when he was still here at Ringling, for sure.
Yeah. And so it'll be nice to catch up with him and kind of get his thoughts on how he would have maybe designed some of the art and visuals of Halo 3 if he was working on the Bungie team during that time.
How do you dodge this? What the hell?
If you want to dodge
my
it, what you
God.
have to do is you have to lower your elevation. So you see here how there's 2 different levels of elevation. You're basically
I see
juggling being
that.
on the floor and being on the platforms throughout the fight.
Oh, that's overwhelming.
It
Yeah,
is a
this is
very
insane.
difficult fight. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad the stream is ending in 3 minutes because this looks painful for you.
I'm having a good time, gotta say. I
I'm glad
really
you're
enjoy
enjoying
playing
yourself.
difficult games, so for me,
Can you, since we have a few minutes left, can you just explain your ethos on why you enjoy difficult games? Because you and I have had this conversation multiple times
I would
over
love.
the past almost 4 years that we've been friends,
Mm-hmm.
and every time I just laugh at myself when talking to you about it. I just want you to say it on my stream,
Yeah.
on our show, because I want other people to just hear your ethos as to why you like these games that punish you for playing them.
Well,
ahead.
yeah, to get into it, basically, and what better time to get into it than while I'm fighting one of these very difficult bosses. But to kind of explain a bit of my ethos, the reason I enjoy difficult games so much is because the sense of reward I feel for overcoming these very difficult encounters, like learning these boss patterns so that I can dodge them without taking any damage. That sense of accomplishment it's so rewarding to me. That it pushes me to kind of go through like all these difficult challenges because I'm just having so much fun kind of studying the boss patterns, learning how to fight them, and overcoming them at the end of it. That I it's just something I love doing.
Well, I think that's actually a perfect place to end it. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. Make sure to tune in to the stream next week at 6 o'clock for Halo. Joe will be kind of the lead on that one, and I will be playing again next week. So, I guess you can get forward to watching me get killed by Flood and Covenant a lot. So, is there any ending statements that anyone wants to make before we log off for the week?
Tune in next week.
None of that, man. Make sure.
Gosh,
The
if you
next
like
episode.
what you see, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
Oh God.
Make it like a Dragon Ball Z outro. Tune in next time for the next Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
I regret. I regret
Quinn
speaking.
immediately regrets asking.
He's just like, all
Immediately
right, bye.
regrets it. The only thing I wish to avoid on YouTube just happened. Yeah, again, thanks for watching, everyone. Xavier, go ahead and just kill the stream.
All right, sure thing.
Do it. Thank you. Have a nice night, everyone.
Yeah.